Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Sketchbook Sunday video. This week I wanted to do this lemon still life painting using acrylic, and the colors I used were titanium white, primary yellow, cadmium yellow lemon hue, raw sienna, hooker's green hue permanent, primary blue, and Mars black. This week is going to be a little different because I am working with acrylics. One of the things that I wanted to kind of focus on in dealing with a bit of art block was just working with some different mediums, and I thought acrylic would be a really fun start, and it is a medium that I've worked with in the past. I've actually worked with this prior to working with watercolor, so I'm not completely unfamiliar with it, but I am coming back to it after a few years. So I thought I would do this really kind of fun, more beginner-friendly style video with these. So the colors that I'm using in this video, or the paints rather, are the Liquitex Basics paints. And for the base layer of the lemon, I went through and I put down a cadmium yellow medium hue. And I put it down really quite thickly. I'm just kind of blocking in the colors with this layer, trying to get the shadows and the shadows and highlights where I want them, and I'm not really focusing on being too neat here. I also put in titanium white for the highlights and raw sienna for the dark areas. And as I'm just laying these down, I'm not trying to be all that careful about them. I know that this is the base layer, and I know that a lot of this is going to be covered up later on, so I just want to make sure that the rough values are correct. Now for the background, I wanted it to be kind of dark, but it did come out a little bit darker than I had anticipated. I used a mix of primary blue and Mars black, and I just wanted something where the really bright lemons would kind of pop against them. And for the leaves, I used the Hooker's Green hue permanent, and I am mixing that with a little bit of lemon yellow just to kind of brighten it up a little bit. I also used some primary yellow on the base layer of the lemons. Now, if you are unfamiliar with acrylics, what you're going to find, just like in other colors, like in watercolor, that these have both opaque and translucent colors. So what you'll find is that some are going to layer or cover better than others. Like the raw sienna is a very transparent kind of color, so it's going to be very easy to cover up with the more opaque yellow. And the green is also very translucent as well, so it takes a little bit more paint to kind of cover up that area than you might think. The leaves used several layers of green, whereas the lemon didn't really take as much. Now here I'm just kind of going through and I'm starting up the second layer of paints, and I'm using a mixture of the lemon yellow and white, and I'm just trying to get a lighter tone overall. You can see I'm going in and I'm covering up those darker areas, and since I watered this down a little bit, it is a little bit more transparent, but it's still putting down really good coverage over those darker areas. And since some of the first layer is still a little bit wet, some of it I was still able to very easily kind of blend into this layer, which is what I was kind of hoping for. And as you can see, some of those weren't as wet as I was hoping, so I am laying down more raw sienna, and I'm going back through and I'm just layering up and building those colors. Instead of doing these kind of sweeping brush strokes, I'm going in and I'm just tapping in that color, making sure to try and not move the colors where I don't want it to go. So I am going in and I'm using lemon yellow straight from the tube, and I'm just kind of going in and getting some of those slightly darker areas a little bit more saturated, and I'm also trying to clean up some of the lines from the dark blue. I know that I'm not going to be able to cover up that blue completely with this layer, but just to kind of help get the lines right, and I know that over the next layers I will go through and make it a little bit better. For the stem, I used some of the raw sienna, and I added a bit of green and just a tiny hint of the Mars black to that. I wanted to keep this painting kind of harmonious and use a lot of the same colors. I didn't want to have a bunch of different paints out, so keeping it kind of all in the same family keeps it, like I said, really quite harmonious. And now we're up to layer 3 or 4, and I'm just kind of fine-tuning things. I'm adding in some of those smaller shadows. I'm adding in areas to kind of distinguish the shadow areas a little bit better in some of the lemons, and also some of the kind of cast shadows that would happen towards the bottom of the fruit. For the leaves, I'm going in and I'm adding more of that green, and I added a little bit of the raw sienna to really kind of deepen it up, since I knew I wanted these to have a darker tone to them overall. And I also go through and I add a mixture of lemon yellow and raw sienna with just a hint of green to kind of add some highlights to the leaves as well. And as you can see, I'm just going in and I'm really kind of building up those layers since the green is so transparent. I'm also adding some white since I knew that around the edge of some of the leaves, I wanted to be able to carry in those highlights. And at this point, I'm also thinking that the green is so hard to cover that I'm trying to put in a layer that's really opaque while building up those layers a little bit. And I actually had really good luck with that. So here you can see I am adding a little bit of yellow to that mixture, trying to keep it a little bit warmer, but overall you're not going to see a lot of this yellow. But I'm just trying to kind of build up depth, and when you are layering colors like this, some of those layers are going to show through in the final piece. And for the darker areas, I just added a little bit of that Mars black, since just mixing it with the raw sienna isn't going to really bring out the depth, it's more going to neutralize it. And I did want to do both in this. If you have a Payne's gray, that would probably work as well. Or if you had a deeper green to work with, but I had a limited set of colors that I was working from and I wanted to stay in that. So I'm going through and again adding more of that kind of more yellow-green to these leaves. Again, not all of that's going to show through, but I wanted to be able to really accent the different leaves that were in this painting. If you aren't careful with the values that you're putting down, then it'll be really easy for all of them to just kind of blend into one another. So after letting it dry, I did go through and I added just a few more layers. I'm just kind of cleaning up areas, making sure that they are blended the way that I want them to, especially with some of the highlights. I wanted the highlights to have kind of a softer look, but also not be a soft gradient outward. So again, just kind of patting those in a little bit. And with the leaves, going through and making sure to add some interest towards the center of the leaves so they didn't look so flat and one-dimensional. Towards the outside of the leaves, you do want them to have some of those lighter areas where like the light will kind of be hitting them, and shadow areas as they kind of gently fold inward, as you can usually see around the stem areas. And again, just going through and adding more depth and more layers to that. So here I'm going in with that blue mixture and I'm just cleaning up those edges a little bit more, trying to get the lemons to look more round and more natural without all of those kind of jagged edges that had come through with the first layer. And I added a slightly darker version of that brown that I did earlier and just a little bit of a white highlight. Now as I'm peeling off the paint, I realized that I didn't get all the way to the edges with that dark blue mixture. So I'm just going through and I'm adding in more paint to just get a cleaner line. However, I did find that with this paint I did end up with some kind of jagged edges, which I'll have to clean up later. So here's the lemon painting all finished. It was kind of a quick painting and it was really fun to do. I hope you enjoyed this week's video, and if you are new to acrylic, I hope that you give this painting a try. So that is all for this week's video, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye!